as a writer, of course, you have to be a reader before. So I read a lot of books, novels, especially French novels or other novels from England, from USA or Germany. So it's always very interesting to find new characters, new story from different countries. Usually my novels are in Paris and in France. So maybe one day I will do something in England, or why not in the USA also. Yeah.
Welcome, Antoine Laurain. As my family knows, every time I read a paragraph of your book, The President's Hat, I kept sort of putting, I've got to read this little bit out. So they know the whole of the book, more or less, off by heart. It is absolutely wonderful. Now, I know we're going to talk about hats, and you've talked about hats a lot because this has been a very, very successful book, The President's Hat. But let's talk a little bit about you before you became...
chocolate.
And chocolate. Are you happy to talk about chocolate? I'm very happy to talk about chocolate. But to talk about before you became the author of The President's Hat, what were you doing? What was your... Because you did a number of very interesting jobs, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, and some not very interesting also.
Yeah. Well, tell me, which were the interesting ones?
Maybe to work with an antique dealer was very, very interesting in an antique shop in Paris. I thought at the beginning that it was a little job for the summer, but I spent 9 years, so...
So you know a lot about antiques.
Yes, and many, you know, you have a kind of passion at the end for things and antique things, and maybe the hat.
Now, there's also a lot about art in this. I mean, I don't think anybody should in any way be fooled by the fact that this book is actually quite, it's done that, this very bottom one, it looks quite small, but in fact there's so much in it. It's absolutely packed. There's a lot of art. You've also worked in film and as a film scriptwriter, and this has actually been made into a film, hasn't it, The President's Hat?
Yes,
is that right?
Yes, a film for the French television, not a movie.
Well, BBC Four, I think, should maybe take that one over.
Yes, but the next one it will be a movie, so I have a progression.
Now, you've written a number of novels. Tell us about the first one.
My first novel?
What was your first novel?
The first one, yes, it was, I wrote it at this antique shop between 2 or 3 clients, you know. Sometimes it's difficult, you have many hours in the silence. So that was good to become a writer. So I wrote my first book, and the story was a man who find a portrait made at the 18th century, but the portrait looked like him very, very much. So
that's the one, Aïeux si je suis.
Yes.
That was your very first one. And then you wrote Fumais-tu?
Yes.
And that's also not been translated, I don't think.
No.
This is the first one to be.
Should be.
Yeah. I should think after all of this. And then, I mean, I love the titles. The other one, Carrefour de Nostalgie, which is absolutely perfect title again. We've had some great titles tonight. Now, the subjects you look at, that one was about a politician. Carrefour was about a politician. Yes. But in this book, they all come together in The President's Hat. You've got politics, you've got the culture of Paris, you've got food, you've got drink, you name check certain wines. I mean, there's everything in this book too. I mean, how did you come to write a book about the hat of President Mitterrand?
Probably because I have lost my hat a few years ago.
So it's true, you did lose your hat?
Yes, it's true, but it's not an autobiography, of course. It's just this detail. I forgot it in a cafe in Paris, and then I went back the day after, but it wasn't there anymore. They have many hats, but not mine. And
did you ever get it back?
no, never. So that's the point. It means that right at the moment I was looking for my hat, probably someone else was wearing it in the city, and I never know who. So that was a twisted thought, you know. And at the same moment, I wanted to write a novel, but a novel like a kind of fairy tale. And it should be in the 80s. So all that elements, my hat, the fairy tale, the 80s, makes at the end the president's hat and the different character you have in the president's hat.
Now, we spoke about in Jonas's book, which is set in 1986, or starts in 1986, and this one, coincidentally, also is that year. Now, this year it was a key year in President Mitterrand's political career.
Yes, because he lost a part of the French election, so a prime minister from the right hand came, Mr. Chirac.
We know him well. Now, in this period, you're looking at the whole Mitterrand era, and you chose this very specific time, the 1980s, and the whole picture of Paris and of France and the different issues and how people live, and the television and what they watch and what they read and so on, and what they eat. It all comes together in this. Was this something you had to do a lot of major research about, or is this just an era that you remember very well?
Both. Mainly, I remember very well the 80s, but sometimes I had to check if it was true that this song was really #1 at the hit top. So it was those kind of checking for the book, but. Mainly, I wanted to be back in the 80s.
Is that your favourite era? Did you like that era?
Yes, but it was quite good, you know, to be back in a world without mobile phone, without internet, without email, without rap music. So it seems to be a very quiet world.
But also the discussions that people had too, because there's this wonderful dinner party discussion in Bernard's section. Because there are 4 characters, and Mitterrand's hat is passed on from one character to the next, and it's all coincidence how it happens. But it starts off with Daniel Mercier. Daniel finds the hat. Yeah. Daniel's sitting in a restaurant, and lo and behold, Mitterrand and Roland Dumas turn up in the brasserie that Daniel, this ordinary man, is sitting, and Mitterrand happens to sit next to him. Yeah. And Mitterrand leaves his hat. And then the hat is passed on to these other characters through the novel. But there's this scene, which is probably the key political scene, where this dinner party, this group of people at a dinner party discussing Mitterrand.
Yes.
And they called him Mitterrand.
Yes, that was a special way to call him in France when you were really from the right wing, quite the hard one, and it was a kind of it's not a nickname, but it was a bad pronunciation of his name, and it means that of course you were completely against him. So Bernard Lavallière, a man from the French bourgeoisie, get the hat of the president, but of course he didn't know that there is an exchange, and he became to have socialist thoughts. So of course in his life with the kind of friends he has, it's going to be difficult.
It is certainly a challenge, that one, but
yes.
That the hat transforms people's lives. That's what it's about, really.
Yes.
But is this what you believe in? That you know, are people transformed by the hat, by owning the hat, or are they transformed by changing something in their lives as a result of I don't know. I mean, what is it? What's the chicken and egg situation, really?
I know.
Hat and egg situation.
It's one of the main questions in the book, and this question will never be solved.
So you don't know either?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe is there something in the president's hat? I mean, a sort of DNA from the president, something from his mind, who can make your mind better, make you clever. It's possible, but maybe it's just a hat. It's just the way you've got it.
But it's a very positive story, though.
It's a very positive story. Yes, it is. Yes.
It's about the power of change.
It's an optimistic fairy tale about destiny, and you know, in fairy tales you have sometimes a very important thing that you must reach. In this one, it's just a black hat. And this black hat can change your life. It depends the way you see it.
Now, why do you choose these four characters? Because, I mean, one of them, for instance, very intriguingly, is Ané. He is a perfumier. And it's an absolutely fascinating profession. I actually once made a BBC programme about the perfumier of Chanel, Jacques Polge, who's very famous perfumier. So I think it's an absolutely fascinating profession. But why did you choose these specific professions?
Because...
or people, rather.
Yes. It's a kind of picture of the French society at a moment in the 80s. You have the first one, the man who works in an office in at an economic department, and after you have this young girl. She has some Fanny Marcon, yes. She has some problems with her lover, which is a married man, and after you have the nose, yes. That was a mysterious character, and at the beginning of his story, he's in a kind of nervous breakdown.
He's very depressed because he hasn't been able to invent a new perfume.
Yes, yes. So that was interesting to have this one. He's a little a dark part of the book, and after he goes to the light.
So, would you ever think of writing about shoes or handbags or?
No. But bags or lady bags, maybe.
You would? I've got
maybe.
I've got a few.
Yeah.
You do think of writing a book about a bag?
Yes, yes. That's
jolly good. I'll be the first out there to buy that one.
Oh yeah, that will be my next one.
It is definitely your next book.
Yes, yes.
Truly.
Truly.
I can't believe my luck.
No, that wasn't a joke.
That wasn't a joke.
No.
Oh, wonderful. Now we're going to hear, I'm so delighted to hear that, we're going to hear a reading from The President's Hat. Now, The President's Hat is published by the wonderful Gallic Books. It's been translated by Gallic Books too, in the voices of Jane Aitken, Emily Boyce and Louise Rogers-Lalaurie. Now, Emily is going to read from The President's Hat for us, one of the translators. Thank you very much indeed. And just while Emily's getting to the stage, I've got a couple of quotes I wrote down, which I thought were just wonderful. Mitterrand says at the table when he's sitting next to Daniel Essay, as I was saying to Helmut Kohl last week. It's become one of my favourite quotes. There you are. Thank you, Emily.
Just on the subject of the next book, the Red Notebook, we've got some extracts on tables out there, so you can discover the story, which does indeed star a handbag. Yes. François Mitterrand had forgotten his hat. The phrase took shape in his mind. This is François Mitterrand's hat. Here, right next to you. Proof that this evening was real. Absolute proof that it had really happened. Danielle turned to look again at the hat, which had been carefully placed between the brass rail and the mirror. Behind the black hat, the whole restaurant was reflected. Instead of calling over the head waiter to say self-importantly, "I think the customer at the table next to me has left his hat behind," and receiving obsequious thanks, Daniel acted on impulse. He felt as if he had a double, and that another Daniel Mercier now stood in the middle of the dining room, witness to the simple, irreversible action that would be taken in the next few seconds. Daniel watched as he raised his own hand to the brass bar, lifted the black hat carefully by the brim, and slipped it onto his lap, where it remained hidden from view under the table. The whole operation took no more than 3.5 seconds, but it seemed to him to have been performed in desperately slow motion, so that when the sounds of the dining room reached his ears once more, he felt as if he was emerging from a long period underwater. The blood beat in his temples and his heart thumped in his chest. What if someone came back to claim the hat now, he thought, in a brief moment of panic? A bodyguard, the president himself. What would he do? What could he possibly say? How could he explain the sudden transfer of the hat to his lap? He had just committed an act of theft. The last time he had stolen something was in early adolescence in a shopping centre in Courbevoie, egged on by a friend after school. They had stolen a record, Aline, a hit single by the pop star Christophe. Since that afternoon back in 1965, he had never done such a thing again. What he had just done was far worse than sneaking a record into his school bag in a supermarket. Daniel sat motionless, his eyes darting around the room at the other diners. No one had seen him, he was sure of it. Nothing to fear on that score. But now he had to leave before anything untoward happened, before the president asked someone to call the restaurant looking for his hat, before the waiters came scurrying to the table under the furious gaze of the maitre d'. Daniel asked for the bill, saying he would pay by card. The waiter returned with the card machine. Daniel hardly noticed the amount. Nothing mattered anymore. He signed the slip and took his receipt. He rummaged in his pockets for a tip and put it in the chrome dish. The waiter bowed slightly in a gesture of thanks and walked away. "Now," said Daniel to himself. His mouth was dry, so he poured himself a glass of water and gulped it down, then delicately extracted the presidential hat from under the tablecloth and put it on his head. Yes, it fitted perfectly. He put on his coat and headed for the door, feeling as if his legs were about to give way. The maitre d' would stop him. "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, s'il vous plaît, the hat, monsieur." But nothing of the kind happened. Daniel had left a 15-franc tip, and the waiters all nodded respectfully as he passed. Even the maitre d' attempted a smile, which lifted the tips of his narrow moustache. The door was held open for him, and he stepped out into the cold, turning up the collar of his coat and heading for his car. "Mitterrand's hat is on my head," he told himself. Once in the driver's seat, with the hat still on his head, Daniel angled the rearview mirror and gazed at his reflection in silence for several minutes. He felt as if his brain was bathed in a refreshing dose of sparkling aspirin. Bubbles of oxygen were fizzing through zones that had slumbered for too long. He turned the key in the ignition and drove off slowly into the night. Daniel drove through the streets for a long while, circling his neighbourhood several times before leaving the car on level 5 of his building's underground car park. He could have driven like that for hours, his mind a complete blank. He felt buoyed up with a confidence that was as comforting as a warm bath. In the deserted living room, he sat down on the sofa and looked at his reflection in the blank television screen. He saw a man sitting with a hat on his head, nodding slowly. He stayed like that for a good hour, contemplating his own image, his entire being suffused with an almost mystical feeling of serene calm. It was 2 a.m. before he listened to his wife's message on the answering machine. Everything was fine in Normandy. Véronique and Jérôme would be back the next day, arriving at Gare Saint-Lazare at 9:45 p.m. Daniel undressed. The last item he removed was the hat. He gazed in wonder at 2 letters embossed in gold on the band of leather running round the inside. FM.